It's been a year since Pete Carroll was let go as head coach of the Seattle Seahawks and also relieved of his vice presidential duties, thus freeing up general manager John Schneider to fully be in control for the first time in 14 years here in Seattle in his capacity. Now, we've had a year. I think we have a chance now to do a little bit of a report card on John to make an assessment of how he's done over this year, now fully freed up of any overriding decision-making coming from Coach Carroll. So let's go one by one through the different parts of what makes up what he does as a general manager to get an idea of how he has done this year. And before we get to these grades, let me just say off the rip that this has been a successful season for the Seahawks. You brought on a really nice coach, you got to 10 wins, you improved a little bit beyond what you were last year, albeit that was aided by the final game of the season where the Rams weren't playing much of anybody to get to that 10 wins, but it was a successful year. So this report card's not to take away from anything from the fact that this was a good year, that the future is bright, that there's a lot of optimism rightfully placed in the Seahawks fan base right now. It's again just taking a little bit of a snapshot of this past year and what John has done. Here are the 6 categories for the report card as I would delineate them. Trades, in-house contracts, and money management. This would be money spent on your own roster to retain your own free agents or give out extensions. Free agency additions. Lost quality players to free agency. Those players you lost in free agency and what they did after you moved on. Essentially, was it a smart move not to retain them, especially considering what John did as an alternative to resigning them? Draft productivity year 1. Yes, you usually want to wait 3 years before assessing draft classes, but good teams get productivity from their drafts quickly. Look at the early returns the Los Angeles Rams got this year from Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, Bo Limmer, Cameron Kitchens, and Jordan Winnington. Or San Francisco this year with Ricardo Green, Dominic Pooney, Malik Mustafa, and Isaac Guerrero. First category up will be trades. John Schneider only made 4 deals this past year, 2 in the end of training camp, 2 in season, so not a lot to turn over here. Darrell Taylor being the first guy that was moved right at the end of training camp, and this was a good deal from John Schneider's perspective as Darrell Taylor was more a player that fit to the old regime rather than the new one. Mike Macdonald looks for bigger edges. He wants to have those guys that can be power edges and really can set the hard edge to force the run back inside. Anybody that's watched Darrell Taylor just knows that's not his game, and so he was likely to be a cut candidate if John Schneider was not able to find a trade partner out there at the end of training camp. And he did, moved him to Chicago for a 6th round pick in this upcoming draft. And though some 12s would have you believe that Taylor went out there and had a great year for the Bears, he did not. He was what he's always kind of been. Gave them 3 sacks on the year, did not give them good run defense, was about the 79th highest rated edge by PFF in the game. So this was a good deal for John. You got to give him a solid B on this one. A trade then made in conjunction with this deal was then Seahawks looking to go find that power edge. And the guy that they looked for first was Trevis Gibson to fill that mark from the Jacksonville Jaguars. You gave up a late round pick in this upcoming draft to go get him. He came in here and he was by and large a disappointment. He just didn't provide any kind of impact. Had a lot of games where he was inactive this season. This one's just purely an F, though you didn't give up a lot to go get him. The Seahawks, because the Gibson move didn't work, then had to go out there and get Roy Robertson Harris, also from the Jacksonville Jaguars, who were a little bit more in sell mode at that point in time. Harris came in here and gave you just a little bit better play than what Gibson had given you as that power edge, but still not much by and large. It was still pretty empty on the whole in what he gave you. A little bit of pressure at times, a little bit of run defense at times, but a lot of the year where he was by and large kind of unnoticeable out there. But still gave you a little bit of a moderate amount of impact. It was for a future 2026 6th round pick, so that's not a high cost for that. So about a C- grade on this one. The final trade and the best trade that John Schneider made this past year was for Ernest Jones. Jones, who went to the Tennessee Titans in a training camp deal with the Los Angeles Rams because they didn't want to trade him to us. We were interested in him. They didn't want to move him to us, so they moved him on out there to the AFC. We were able to then pull him back in here for a 4th round pick, which is a moderate high cost, but you had some really grade A impact in what he brought to the field after the trade. This guy came in and he cinched down the running game almost by and large, him and Tyrese Knight on their own. He was such a big improvement over what you had from the prior linebackers early on this season and really looks like he's going to be a building block piece of this team as they go forward. I'm expecting he's signed to a contract extension. This is a smashing success from John Schneider's perspective. You got to give him an A on this one. So we got an A, a B, a C-, and an F. I put it in the formula. It comes out to a C+ for John when it comes to trades. Money management and in-house contracts. This is going to be another mixed bag here from John Schneider. Some good, some bad, some really good, some really bad. First, when it comes to letting go of players that you probably should have let go of and you were smart to do so. At the head of the list, Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams, 2 guys that weren't going to give you a lot going in the future, who weren't a fit to the new defense. And Jamal Adams' case especially, a guy that just was at the end of the road when it comes to his career. So smart of John to move off of both of these 2 players. You like in the Jamal Adams deal that you you ate all of that dead money on the front of this, that you sustain that right now in Mike Macdonald's first year so that you can clear that money off the books moving into year 2 of Mike Macdonald. I think that looks pretty smart in retrospect. On some of the lesser, smarter things as far as managing the money in-house, the rework deals to Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf, while they did free up a little bit more money for you to get your normal business done last year, you are feeling a little bit more of that pain now this year on this year's cap when you don't have a lot of money, especially when it comes to a guy like Tyler Lockett, where if you hadn't reworked that deal, you came into last year of his deal here now, you'd be saving substantially more money than you're really going to save on the deal by cutting him here, which is still a little bit of dough, but it could have been much more if you hadn't have reworked that deal, if you didn't have to rework that deal because you had enough money because you hadn't have stretched your cap already last year. For a year, you weren't going for it. You don't like to see these kind of moves, the voidable years added to the DK Metcalf contract, unless you truly are going for it. On the good side of this, the Seahawks signed Leonard Williams to the contract extension right at the start of their free agency, keeping him out in-house, having the Hawks not be in a perspective of losing that second-round pick that they moved for Leonard Williams at the trade deadline, and they signed him to over a $20 million a year deal, yet Leonard Williams went out there and rewarded John Schneider for that commitment, giving the Seahawks basically a defensive player of the year-like play from the 3-tech position this year, which was wonderful to see. Likewise, Julian Love was given a contract extension right before the start of the year. It was a deal that wasn't like the Quandre Diggs or Jamal Adams deal where it broke the bank. It was a deal that made a lot of sense for the player. It made a lot of sense for the team. He went out there and gave you basically a Pro Bowl season, a top 10 level play of season from the safety position at a good cost. He's only going to cost about $6.5 million on the cap next year. You feel great about those deals. So those are 2 A's right across the board, no doubt about it. Noah Fant may be the one you feel a little bit shaky on. He was retained this year on a 2-year deal, which is essentially a 1-year deal because the Seahawks keep thinking that you're going to be able to tap into that high level of talent that he would seem to have that once made him a first-round pick in the NFL draft. And he went out and gave you a 500-yard receiving season. It wasn't bad. Injuries did come back up again. There is some issues with him as a blocker. It wasn't a bad year, but it's kind of like a C-plus kind of deal from a Seahawks perspective where it was fine. I still am expecting them to probably release him as we get into the upcoming free agent period. There's no 2 ways to slice it. Free agency was atrocious for John Schneider this year. And what's really disconcerting about this is that he's continued on with the trend that he's tried out year after year after year after year. And that is that I'm going to sign these aging veterans to 1-year contracts. We're going to give them prove-it deals. And you know what we're going to get? We're going to get their best selves. We're going to get them hungry. We're going to get them fighting for that next multi-year deal that they want to get after this season. We're going to get them in the off-season training and in their best shape by the time that they get to training camp. And this is all good in theory, and it probably looks good on paper, but it hasn't worked. Hasn't worked in the prior years and absolutely fell flat on its face this year with almost every single signing. And let's go one by one through them all. Rayshawn Jenkins, brought in to be your starting safety, wasn't a good one, then got injured. Then he could not unseat Kobe Bryant, who had a pretty good year for your Seahawks, but you got really much of nothing from Rayshawn Jenkins. Nick Harris was a center that you brought in to come in and duke it out with Oluwatimi at that starting center position. Who could be number 1 for you? He wasn't very good. Oluwatimi wasn't very good. This forced you to have to go sign Connor Williams at the 25th hour of training camp, and then you move Nick Harris to the Browns for a 7th-round pick in 2026, which is almost just about nothing kind of value. You got your 2 inside linebackers, again, both signed on a 1-year deal. Jerome Baker, Tyrell Dodson, both of them atrocious. Neither of the 2 of them even able to last halfway into the season, and it just keeps getting worse from there. Laken Tomlinson, an older, aging guard, and you've done this so many different times, whether it be guard or center, from your Austin Blythes to your Evan Browns to your Gabe Jacksons to your Luke Jokels. You've gone down this road so many times. You gave him a 1-year, $3 million deal, a guy that was not absolutely the opposite of a fit for this spread system and the mobile-based stuff that you're going to ask from these offensive linemen, and he didn't have a very good season. A weird signing at the time, and definitely a weird signing as we stand now here after the season. He wasn't god-awful, but he wasn't good, and especially in pass protection, he was a huge negative, which is kind of problematic for a team that was going to be almost one of the league leaders in passing attempts on the season. Jonathan Hankins was supposed to be brought in to be one of your nose tackles in here and to lock that down. You had a couple of bodies that you could hope could kind of solidify themselves at that nose tackle position. He had a good game with the Dolphins, but by and large, he just looks like he's at the end of his road. Doesn't have much gas left in the tank. He had a lot of games where he wasn't particularly good. Those games where we had bad run defending days defensively, you could find him as one of those centerpiece points as to why it was a bad day. because he wasn't as good, was part of the reason that you had to move Byron Murphy from his natural 3-tech role into that nose tackle position because you had nobody else that could get it done. But yet, another bad signing. So hard to look down the alignment of any of these signings and say, hey, there was a good one there, there was a good one there. They were almost all failures in themselves. And again, a place that John can maybe pivot and learn from here where the one-year deals are not working for you. On top of the fact that you eat up all of your salary cap so quickly with all of these one-year deals. It's one thing to give out one here and one there, but when you give out like 5, 6, 7 of them, you eat up whatever cap space you really have really quickly because you're not spreading out the money. You're not spreading it out over a multitude of years. And John's just unwilling to do this year after year, and it's not paying off for him. It's not working, and hopefully he pivots this offseason. Free agent losses, and these are not pretty when you especially match them up against the free agent signings that you made on the other end. First, Bobby Wagner. John Schneider let him walk once unceremoniously, brought him back again. He played well for you last season. You let him walk again here this last offseason. Maybe understandable because he wasn't an exact fit for what Mike Macdonald wanted from his scheme. But then when you look at what you brought in here instead, in Baker and Dodson, and then what Wagner was able to do for Washington, be a leader for that young team, help that defense rise on up. He's got him right now on the precipice of maybe getting to the Super Bowl. That one really hurts, especially considering that the cost wouldn't have been very high. Then you've got Jordan Brooks. You let him go to the Miami Dolphins on a pretty low-end deal to there. He went out there and had his best year of his career, at least rated by PFF. He's still a guy that's kind of a nightmare in coverage, still gave up almost 700 yards in coverage. You can really pick on him in that way, and that was a big reason why the Hawks did let him go. But it still hurts when you watch him have this kind of year, this best year of his career over there with the Dolphins here, again, versus what you brought in here with Baker and Dodson, who were just bad. Evan Brown was not a particularly good center for the Seahawks when he played here last year. The Hawks signed him on one of those one-year, $3 million type deals. He was a bad center, rated about 33rd by PFF, matched the eye test. But the Cardinals went out there and signed him on a one-year, $2.3 million deal, and he actually performed better for them at left guard than Laken Tomlinson performed for you at left guard this year. And that's with you paying more money to Laken Tomlinson versus what Evan Brown would have costed. Ouch. That kind of hurts. And the hits just keep on coming. Will Disley signed by the Los Angeles Chargers to a medium-sized deal after the Hawks cut him and ate dead money to cut him. Went out there and had the best season of his career for the Los Angeles Chargers. Meanwhile, you got nothing for Farrell Brown. Would have been just a smarter move to hold on to Will Disley on his current contract as you had it. Colby Parkinson's one of the moves that's worked out well in the Hawks' favor. The Rams signed him to a kind of reasonably, not high-end deal, but good money. Money the Hawks were not willing to match. He went out there as a guy that they were hoping could be the insurance policy for Higbee coming back off his torn ACL. Parkinson was not a good player for the Rams. I'm expecting they're probably going to end up cutting him this offseason. Hard to give John Schneider a good grade on this one. Losing Bobby Wagner, losing Disley, man, that hurts. Bringing in a Laken Tomlinson and getting lesser play versus the Cardinals getting better value, that one hurts. Got to give him a C- grade on this one. Draft productivity year 1. First up, Byron Murphy, your first-round pick who came in with very high expectations, where many 12s thought this guy could be a guy who'd be like Aaron Donald-like impact. He was not able to supply that in his first year, but not his fault necessarily, as the Seahawks moved him off of his natural 3-tech role into the nose tackle position because Jonathan Hankins was done and because Cameron Young couldn't stay healthy throughout the year and you had nothing else left there to grab, so you had to stick with him and hope he could ride it out. He did a good job. He was a good soldier. He provided good run defense over there for you, but he was not able to provide much pass rushing impact because he was taking on double teams by and large. Pretty good year all over overall. Can't really ding him nonetheless on that one, so you give him a B+ grade with that. Christian Haynes had a real rough opening year for your Hawks. You're hoping he could slide in and be a day one starter for you at right guard. He could not beat out Anthony Bradford to start out in training camp. Then once Anthony Bradford failed out and got injured and he was slid in, was really bad in certain games, just did not look like he was ready to go. Looked like he at least needed 1 year / maybe even will become a bust. We'll just have to see with him with time, as he was supposed to be a pro-ready guard. That was his whole claim to fame coming out of this prior draft, and he looked nothing close to ready to go on that side of it. 2 4th-round picks that worked out really well in the Seattle Seahawks' favor. A.J. Barner out of Michigan was to be brought in and be really a blocking specialist. Wasn't thought to be able to give you much as a pass catcher. Instead, you got a little bit of the inverse. He gave you more as a pass catcher than he actually gave you as a blocker, but a good, bright opening season for the tight end who looks like a guy that could be in the mix to be that starting tight end moving into the future, or at least part of your 2 tight end packages. The guy that was your best rated rookie, your best rookie overall, overall this season was Tyrese Knight out of UTEP. The inside linebacker came in about midseason with Ernest Jones, and the tandem of both of those two guys solidified your defense, especially as you stopped the run, and allowed us to see really the best version of this defense as we went down the home stretch, absent maybe a couple of games where they had a few not so good moments. But he can hit, he can cover, he can blitz, and boy, you better believe he can tackle. This is a guy with some legit upside as we move into the future who I'm really excited about what he can bring. Both could be a Will and a Mike moving into the future, but he's going to be a good linebacker for your Seattle Seahawks. Nehemiah Pritchett didn't play most of this season. When he finally got into play a little bit at the end of the year, including that Rams game, he got abused a little bit as he just did not look ready. DJ James, his running mate out there at Auburn, was cut right at the end of training camp, just not good enough, so you didn't get much out of that one there. Sa'atoa Luamea, the kid that you took out of Utah that was going to be your tackle convert into guard, finally slid into right guard there at the end of the year after Bradford didn't make it, after Haynes didn't make it. Then you went, okay, let's try this guy. He had a game here where he looked okay, and as a run blocker, he looks decent with some upside, but he is in over his head as a pass protector. I believe he had multiple games where he had single-digit grades from PFF as a pass protector, gave up a multitude of pressures. Yes, there's some upside there as far as a run blocker goes, but that might not be as much the case when it comes to him as a pass protector. We're just going to have to see when it comes to that. Mike Jarrell, the kid that you took with your final pick of the draft, wasn't a lot of expectations with him. He's a little bit like Sa'atoa, where you had to kind of force him in there at one point or another in the year because you got so lean at that given position at right tackle. No Lucas, no Fant. Then you lose Stone Forsythe as well. You're down to your fourth-string guy. He did what he could out there. He was all right. He was functional out there. And this kid's actually got some maybe legit upside as we go into the future there with him as a player. I like this kid a lot, and maybe as that swing tackle on that rookie deal, a little bit like Stone's been for us, he can now fill into that role as Stone is now going to be a free agent. Overall draft productivity year one, I give it a C+. You're just wanting a little bit more from these draft classes than this. This is almost a little bit of a bare minimum that you got from this group. It's great to see Tyrese Knight and the upside that he potentially can provide, but moving Byron Murphy off of his number one spot, which does fall in alignment with what the Hawks had done in prior years at times where they don't always put the player in the best position for them to succeed. You sometimes see these guys being moved and bounced around. We've seen this do this with offensive linemen, even drafted offensive linemen really high, as they don't always have really the pathway and approach that's clear for what you're trying to get done with the player. And look, you can't blame him here where Leonard Williams was having the great year he was having at 3-tech, so it's understandable that he wasn't able to unseat Leonard Williams, but still, this isn't why you drafted the kid, is to move him into a nose tackle kind of role. So Knight doing good, Barner doing good, Byron Murphy doing good, but absent that, not a lot else that you got from this draft class. Coaching hire is going to be our final category, and this was John Schneider's best one. He had a major hire to make. He had to fill the shoes of Coach Carroll, that legendary coach, and it was going to be hard to get this hire necessarily right. That's a big shadow that hangs over the top of this organization, and he could have gone the safe route. Could have gone with a Dan Quinn. Could have looked for maybe a Mike Vrabel or something along those lines, a Ben Johnson, get an offensive-minded coach. Instead, he went slowly and surely to John Schneider through the candidates, interviewed them all, did a lot of second interviews, made sure of the one that he wanted to go with, was patient to wait with Mike Macdonald through that long run that the Ravens had through the playoffs last year. And then when he was sure that he had the right guy, he jumped on him. It didn't matter that was going to be the youngest coach in the NFL. It didn't matter that was going to be a first-time head coach. He said, this is the right guy for the job, and he proved to be that. As that youngest head coach in the NFL got 10 wins in his first season, which first-time coaches, youngest head coaches in the NFL, those don't tend to be positions that you're going to find any kind of success in that first year. You're going to go through a rough road. It's going to be some ups and some downs maybe in the best case of scenarios. That wasn't the case with Macdonald this year. You overall came away with this feeling really good about what he did. He took a back-end defense on the back third of things, brought them into a top third state of things. He really seems to be a guy who can make adjustments, who doesn't need to necessarily have strength all across the board to make his scheme work, who can put his players in a position to have success and give them advantages on the football field. Yes, the Ryan Grubb signing didn't work on the offensive coordinator side of it, and now they are looking for a new OC, but this was also one where you were in a bit of a predicament in having to wait for Mike Macdonald to be your head coach and having to wait for the Ravens to be kicked out of the playoffs to go and then get that interview with him. You were going to have to wait for a lot of those OC candidates that were there and the vibrant candidates like an Arthur Smith to kind of leak off the board and be gone by the time you were actually making the head coaching hire. And so you're kind of looking through secondhand parts of that point, having to pick from not a lot of great options. You went for a big swing in Grubb, but they're not married to it. They've gone a different direction this offseason now to where they have more candidates, more brighter candidates to pick from. So I can't knock John on that one. Going to Grubb and picking him was understandable given where they were as far as the progression of the offseason and how few candidates there were available to him. So let's run through the categories again here with their grades. Trades, C+. In-house contracts and money management, B-. Free agent additions, F. Losing quality players in free agency, D. Draft productivity year one, C+. Coaching hire, A+. Final grade, C+. I think C+ is a very fair grade to give John for the season. Yes, 10 wins by and large is a good year overall, but this is also into the third year of that rebuild off of the Russell Wilson pivot, and you had won 10 games and 9 games prior to this. So it wasn't like you were coming from 3 or 4 games. It wasn't like you're the Arizona Cardinals doubling your win total from the prior year. It's a good season, but a lot of the moves as you look at them individually are not particularly good moves. And really looming and hanging over the top of this whole thing is John Schneider's approach to the offensive line. The Seattle Seahawks spent as little of money as anybody in the NFL towards their offensive line this last year. And it would be not a problem as much if it was a 1 year off issue, but this has been a problem that's been going on for about 10 years. In alignment with the thing I spoke about earlier in this video of those 1 year deals that you tend to give to those offensive linemen and aging vets who then don't perform particularly well on that offensive line. A big part of having a good offensive line is going to be continuity and chemistry, but it seems like every year the Seahawks are spinning through different starters at almost every single position, and that they can never take advantage of that advantage that you need to make a good offensive line. He's had a weird approach to this year after year. You don't give those guys that you draft high second contracts. You let guys like a Damian Lewis that was a former third-round pick just walk. Now the cost was high. $13 million is a lot to spend, but you let these guys walk all the time in that way. It was the same thing with an Ethan Posick, and you have an utter refusal of spending big money in free agency or going out there and making any kind of major trade for a quality offensive lineman. And John Schneider's entire 15-year run here, he's only made one trade for a high-quality offensive lineman, that being Dwayne Brown back in 2017, which was a smashing success, but John's never gone down that road again. He's going to be walking into some trepidatious territory here as it goes into this upcoming season, where if he does not deal with this offensive line this offseason or takes the same kind of approach he's taken in recent years to it, I think he's going to be looking at some pitchforks and torches from the fan base moving into this next year, because they are tired of it. They are fed up with it. Part of the frustration from this fan base has come to the fact that you have this problem on your team that you don't deal with year after year after year. And it's getting to a point that I'd say is a breaking point at that. So hopefully John, starting to learn some lessons on this side of it, starts to spend a little bit more of his money smartly, maybe a little more open to making some trades, especially when it comes to bringing on offensive linemen. But hopefully we get a better year from him. Love what he did with the coaching hire. There are some good parts about what he did this year, but you'd really like there to be more of a vision from John, less of him being always reactive to what's happening and what's failing in the moment, more of you seeing them putting a vision in place and then executing that vision with a long-term scope of mind, rather than what it feels like sometimes with him as a general manager, where everything sort of feels like in the now, in the now, in the now. We'll see what they do this offseason. We'll see if John can turn around a better year. Let me know. Was I a little bit too rough on him on the grade? Would you have given him a better grade or a worse grade? Please comment below. My name is Brandon Kane. This is the Hawks Nest. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. But beyond all that, don't you ever forget, go Hawks.